This is the Haulin Assets podcast, where we show you how to start and run your own trucking company. Ever wanted to go out on your own? Follow Chris as he goes through the highs and lows of running on his own authority.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Haulin Assets podcast, episode number 117. Today, we're finally talking about October 2022 financials. Now, normally, if you've been following along with the show, you'll know that we try to get the financials episodes done the following month, right after the numbers are all in. Last month we had a bit of a snafu, and so we're doing October's numbers in December, and presumably November's will follow soon.
I think there's a pretty good chance we'll do November's numbers next episode, because I'm almost already actually
done
ready
with
to
those,
do them.
Yeah. And if you're wondering who our longtime smoker guest is, it's actually Chris. I'm Craig, your host, but over there he's Chris, who is, shall we say, vocally down and out a bit.
Yeah, I'm struggling.
Yeah, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I just don't have a voice. It's been like this for well over a week.
Wow.
Yeah, it just doesn't. And this isn't even the worst of it. I've never lost my voice to this degree and for this long. It's bizarre.
Well, so people are going to get an extra dose of Craig, unfortunately, on this podcast.
I'm struggling.
Yeah, no kidding, man. Well, I'm sorry to hear it. Hopefully it's back by the next time we record, but we'll power through for today, and people can just, adjust their volumes accordingly, I guess. Yeah, hopefully they can hear you all right. Okay, now, Chris, do I dare ask you how things have been out on the road? And, before we get into the numbers, do you want to?
I'm going to try to tell a little story, because we had a interesting thing happen a couple weeks ago that we've never really had happen before. One of our drivers goes to deliver a load that he brought from back east, actually here in the Salt Lake area. Yeah. And he pulls up, goes to the receiver office, hands him the paperwork, and to make a long story short, they're like, this isn't the right paperwork.
Oh, no.
This isn't the right load.
Oh, jeez.
You don't have the right load.
Oh.
And
the wrong load or the wrong paperwork?
They don't know, but they're assuming it's the wrong load, and they won't receive him.
Oh, no.
And we try to talk to the broker. We talk to everybody, and they're like, we got to figure out what's going on. Just go park it, and they're not going to take you today. We'll figure it out. And so later on that day, we figured out, he'd parked in our yard, which is a few miles away from my office. I was in the office. I went, and they said, go take a picture of the seal. So I go take a picture of the seal, send them that, and the seal didn't match the paperwork we'd been given, which that kind of indicates, okay, it's probably the right load, just the wrong paperwork, which is actually what ended up happening. But this was on a Thursday. They wouldn't take him until the following Tuesday.
Oh my gosh. That's excessive.
It is excessive, but it actually ended up working out, because we were able to shuffle a few trailers around. We didn't have anybody off the road longer than they would. Plus, they ended up paying us $250 a day to keep that load.
For sitting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it actually ended up working out.
Well,
all right.
Yeah, and
that's something we've never had happen before. It's kind of a weird situation.
Yeah, that's amazing. So was in that case, would it was something at the brokerage that got mixed up? Was it something you guys did? How'd that work out?
I think it probably was something that happened between the receiver and the shipper, because it was really probably the shipper's fault. Because they obviously loaded the right thing, but gave our driver the wrong paperwork.
Got it. All right. And Chris, you also wanted to mention something else before we started, a kind of a trucking lesson learned.
Yeah.
About when you're leased on to another company.
Well, it's a question that we get asked quite a bit. And it's a reoccurring question. So I figured I'd answer it here.
To the best of your
ability.
To
the best of my abilities with my voice. It's basically, people ask, if I want to get my authority, I'm not quite ready to run independently yet. What if I get my authority activated, but lease under somebody else? And the reason behind doing that, or the logic is, then that way my authority will be active for 6 months or a year. By the time I actually really technically get on the road, brokers will look at me different, and I won't have to suffer that first, 90 days, 6 months,
Right.
year finding loads. And it makes a lot of sense. The problem is that to be able to activate your authority, you have to get the full-blown liability insurance and have that posted to the FMCSA. And so that's you're talking tens of thousands of dollars. Like, it's expensive to be able to do that.
Right.
And when you lease onto somebody else, they also have to have
Insurance,
you
right.
under your liability policy under them. And so in effect, you essentially would be paying for liability insurance twice, which is, it's typically $1,000 to $2,000 a month. So you don't want to be paying that twice if you don't have to. So in most situations, it doesn't make sense. Now, one area where it can work, and this depends a lot on the company that you lease to, instead of technically leasing to them, if they'll let you run under your authority hauling loads for them, but then it can work, because then if you're not technically leased to them, but you're still hauling loads under your own authority for them, you can make that work. There can be issues depending on who you're hauling the loads for. With it can create a double brokering situation, and so all the parties just kind of have to be aware of what's going on.
Right.
And long as that's what's, everybody's good with that's what's happening, that can be a really good way to do it.
So what I'm hearing then is that for most people, most of the time, it's probably not worth it to do it.
Yeah, economically, it's just not worth it.
But there may be some situations where it's okay.
You can kind of work around it, but it's not super easy to do.
Yeah. Well, this is a pretty good lead-in, actually, Chris, because I do need to do a little housekeeping before we dive into the numbers, and remind people to go to HaulinAssetsLLC.com to make your comments, check out the full show notes, the numbers, and all that stuff. But also, lately I've been mentioning MotorCarrierHQ.com a lot, and that is going to be important because of exactly questions like this, where you can listen to this podcast and we can tell you, here's what's right for most people most of the time. But there are going to be exceptions to that. There's no way that we can tell you if you are the exception. So MotorCarrierHQ.com is where you can actually get on the horn with somebody from, what should we just call MCHQ?
Yeah.
From Motor Carrier HQ, get somebody on the phone and say, here's my situation. What do you suggest for me? And that's where you can get the specific advice. So there's your plug.
That's one of the things our business coaches are really good at is looking at your individual case and kind of custom tailoring a game plan based on your scenario. And they can kind of walk you through those different types of situations.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that in mind now, let's go ahead and get into the numbers. We're talking about October 2022 financials. And Chris, I know that this was a tough month again.
It was another tough month.
Yeah. And as I'm thinking back on what happened, I remember, well, you told the story, last episode, the story. It was a heck of a story. But part of that I remember was that you and Nate were both on military duty, right?
Yep.
And that was at the same time. Oh man, that's rough for the company, I'm sure, to have both of you out. But that was end of September, if I recall correctly. And so I'm sure that had an impact. And then I do remember you saying that trucks were sitting for a while because of the story and some other stuff as well. It wasn't just that, but how many trucks were sitting during October?
So that truck sat all of October.
Yeah.
Another truck sat all of October.
Oof.
And then we had
This is out of 8, right?
Out of 8. We actually, the other truck was the 9th truck. We kind of took it in October.
Okay. All right.
And so then we also had a 3rd truck that only ran about half of its normal miles.
Wow.
In the month. So we essentially had 2.5 trucks sitting the entire month. And part of that was, we had that incident in September, and then Nate was on annual training. I was on other military duty, had other things going on. And then to complicate things, Nate and I had planned a vacation together.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah,
that's so cute, Chris.
And we're friends outside of work too. Isn't that awesome? And we'd planned this well over a year ago. It was a cruise.
Yeah.
It was well over a year ago. And you just never know. Timing ended up being horrible.
Yeah.
And so that happened around I think we left like the 20th of October. and we're gone for like 10 days. And so by the time we're this whole thing with the other truck happened, and by the time we're kind of like, okay, let's get hiring, we couldn't really start the hiring process because we were going to be gone. We couldn't bring a driver. We didn't want to bring a driver on right as we were leaving.
Right.
And so that's a big chunk of why those 2 trucks sat the entire month of October.
Right. And this is why it's so tough to be, to own a small company. And we're talking very small, with only maybe just yourself or maybe a few employees, because of things like, hey, vacation, sick days. It's so much easier to absorb those as the organization grows. And, you're on military duty. Nate goes on vacation. Well, we've got a manager who can handle onboarding a new driver. Great. But Haulin Assets isn't there yet.
No. Soon.
Right. And you guys so you just mentioned you brought in the 9th truck, which to me feels like, boy, we're almost there. I don't know why. I just have this feeling in my head like 10 trucks is a milestone. It's potentially a big deal.
It is a milestone. We're actually taking the 10th truck later in December.
In December. Okay, so it will be by the end of the year. Yeah. Amazing.
And along
then
with
you guys are going to slow down.
We're going to slow down next year. Yes, absolutely. There's some good lessons that we've learned over this last year that are going to come out in the podcast.
Yeah.
Specifically associated with growth as the year 2023 goes on, and also to talk about. I don't think I've mentioned this before, but correct me if I'm wrong. But in the first quarter of 2023. Our intent is to bring on a manager that is going to help with that. So when we do have situations where Nate and I are both gone, there will be somebody there that can kind of help out. And that's one of the things that I've kind of noticed as I've watched successful trucking companies grow, that they do consistently is they have apart from the owner, a good, strong manager fairly early on in the life of the trucking company. And so that's become a priority for Nate and I. And we've got somebody in mind. We've started kind of working with them on that, and the intent is to bring them on kind of near the end of the first quarter next year.
Right. That should be interesting to see. Chris, you keep sipping on your drink there because you need it.
I do need it.
I think we're going to get some comments from people who are feeling awfully bad for you today, Chris. All right. Well, with that in mind, I am looking forward to that. I'm interested to see what a manager role looks like in a relatively small fleet. So I'm going to look forward to that. But for today, let's get into the numbers, the October 2022 numbers. Chris, I actually have the cheat sheet here, and I want to spare you the pain. Not only the pain, but the embarrassment of how you sound right now. So, do you want me to do the numbers?
Do the numbers.
Yeah. Okay. So we always start with the total miles run, which we have to again contextualize very quickly and say that that 2.5 trucks, so to speak, were off the road in October, which sucks. So you said you brought on the 9th truck in October, but it wasn't fully onboarded yet, so to speak, right? So call it 8 trucks, and 5.5 of them were running. That's rough. So total miles run 63,455, which is, well, to say that that's a drop would be a bit of an understatement, right? Do you recall what the kind of average was that we've been seeing for the last 6 months or so?
Well, it's the lowest number of miles we've had since May.
Amazing. Yeah, with supposed to be the most trucks out on the road. Okay. Now, Deadhead miles of that, 4,495, which comes out to 7% on the dot, which, again, highest that we've had in a while. I remember when, a year ago, 2 years ago, sometimes it would creep up closer to 10. But for 2022, it's always been closer to 5.5, something like that.
Yeah.
So 7% is a pretty big jump. Is there anything that we attribute that to, or is it just kind of a rough month?
Just kind of a rough month. Yeah. A few more loads out of Idaho for potatoes, and that always increases Deadhead.
Okay. All right. Now, the total revenue recorded in October, $134,900. $281.24, which is not a record.
No,
not a record.
Yeah, it's a typo.
Okay,
it's not a record.
I was going to say, I was like, this can't be a record.
Yeah, it's the lowest we've had since January.
So it's a record in a way
because it's bad.
So yeah, 134,000. I was going to say that should be up almost closer to 200.
I mean, we should be pushing 200. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, very rough month, which gives us an all-in rate per mile of $2.12. Could be worse, but not a lot worse.
Yeah, it's been a while.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's been quite a while since we've had a rate that low. First time this year we've been that low. I didn't go back past this year, but I would suspect that it may even be like pre-pandemic since we've had a rate that low.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. Now is the freight rates, sorry, I know how to talk. I'm a professional, Chris. It's fine. You're the one struggling. Okay. Not me. Freight rates are struggling, which is not typical for this time of year. Well, I don't know. October, I guess we're not quite into the holiday push yet in October.
The strongest is definitely not October.
Yeah.
And to, say a little bit, the latter half of November rates started to get a little bit better. We're into December and they're still better than they were. So we're not going to see that low of a number in November, I don't think.
Yeah.
And it was still kind of low at the beginning of November, but by the end they started to recover a little bit. And so hopefully November is going to be
a little better.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we're at 212 in October, maybe we can start eyeing the 230s, 240s again in November.
Yeah,
on average.
And maybe even I wouldn't be super surprised if December we see closer to 250.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, yeah, hopefully that's something to look forward to then. But ultimately, the number we want to look at is the bottom line on the profit and loss statement. And in this case, if people haven't been able to figure it out by now, there's going to be some parentheses around this number, which in accounting terms means negative, which is bad. Yeah. This month, Haulin Assets had a loss of $20,825.09. So round it up, call it $21K. That is, again, a significant loss. There was a loss like that in September, if I recall. Or was it August?
It was July.
Okay. Anyway.
A $17,000 loss in July.
Yeah. And at the time, we were talking about it and, talking about how, hey, we can absorb a loss like this because we've been saving money, because we've been responsible. But at the same time, you did say at the time, we can't absorb a lot of losses like this, especially during a year when Haulin Assets has grown like gangbusters truck-wise. What did the year start with? 4 trucks, 5 trucks, maybe something like that. I mean, that's
a good question.
We'll have to go back and look.
It's probably like 4 or 5.
Yeah. Anyway, point being, you double the fleet in a year. That's a big growth year, and you're not going to want to absorb a bunch of losses like this.
No, it's a hard time to have a loss like that. Luckily, the beginning of the year was pretty strong. So overall, this year is going to turn out and be okay.
Yeah.
But the rates that we're seeing in October, I don't foresee them being like this forever. It's not sustainable. You'll see the market have, times like this. Like January and February are going to be interesting. Usually, traditionally, if you look over the last 20 years, January and February are the lowest volume months, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens this year. I could kind of almost see it going either way. There's an argument out there that inventories are getting low again. They've been high. That's why the fourth quarter hasn't seen the normal push that it has, because inventories have been so high. Department stores and everybody else just haven't had to ship things in. But those inventories are getting eaten up because consumer spending is still super strong.
Pretty high, yeah.
And so you may see that January and February companies are going to have to recover and replenish some of those inventories. I don't foresee a spike by any means, but I don't think it's going to get worse than it was in October.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and if it's always tricky to predict the market like that, right? But you have to do your best to consider how things will probably be.
Yeah.
and plan accordingly. So, Chris, if you don't mind me asking you, I'm trying not to make you talk any more than necessary, but I do have a question with now October's numbers done and November's numbers coming in. Does that, as you're looking, say, at September, October, does that affect, the way you and Nate as managers of this company, does that affect the way that you guys start looking at employee time off? Or is that kind of baked into the cake? You're like, hey, around Christmas time, people are going to want to be with their families. So if you're looking at an October loss of $21K, does that start ringing alarm bells and you're going to your employees saying, hey, everybody, vacation's canceled or anything like that? Or do you kind of just assume it's going to be that way?
That's a great question. And employees is the one area where I have a really hard time, like trying to force people to do things they don't want because they can always go somewhere else. And so in reality, will it change our behavior over, what we allow as far as vacation time off goes? And over Christmas, probably not.
Yeah.
Just because, it's one thing to have somebody miss 2 or 3 extra days. It's another thing to have somebody quit and have to fill them up.
Yeah.
I mean, if we take a harder stance on vacation time and it causes one of our employees to quit, we're worse off.
Right.
And so probably not going to do that, but it is having an effect on our decision making. Like we're actually going to meet with our truck rep today to try to get an idea of, we've got, I think 4 trucks on order for next year. We may want to pare that back even a little bit. So we're going to have that discussion with him today, kind of see what, from his vantage point, what the pros and cons are. And
I'm sure it'll have an effect as well on planning things like what you and Nate did, vacation wise.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to do that again this year.
Doing a simultaneous vacation. Yeah, that's could have been worse, but could have been a lot better planning wise. But you never know.
Nate and his wife are kind of in a period in their life where they've got really young kids. Traveling's not easy to do.
Right.
So to take a big vacation like that is like a once every 5-year thing for them.
Yeah.
So it's not going to happen.
It wouldn't happen anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Well.
And that's part of the reason why we're still like, okay, we're still going to do it, even though it's going to hurt the business.
Right. Okay. Well, then let's talk just a little bit more about the low rates, right? You talked about the rates being, well, not the strongest. Hopefully they'll pick up. But I kind of want to ask you about what you personally can do about that. With Haulin Assets, the company, can you negotiate things? Can you, or is it not about the rate per mile that you're getting as so much as the expenses that you're putting out there, working harder on fuel expenses and whatnot? What do you do about this?
So if I look at this, and I have obviously, why did we have this loss in October? And I think there's kind of really 2 big contributing factors. One of them is more in our control. One of them a little bit less in our control. So the first big thing is the low number of miles that we ran. And that's really, to a great extent, really in our control. We had 2 trucks sitting. We made some business decisions that caused those trucks to sit longer than they should have. We also, just because of our military service, they sat longer than they normally would have.
Just because you weren't there to pull the trigger on decisions.
Well, that, and if Nate would have been around or Nate or I would have been around to hire earlier.
Right.
Nate didn't get off the 2-week military leave until the first week of October. And by that time, we're like 2 weeks away from going on that vacation, which just really isn't enough time to find and onboard a new person. If he could have started that process 2 weeks earlier because, he wasn't on military duty, then we would have been able to start that process and probably could have had somebody in both of those trucks before we took off. And so the combination of those things caused those trucks to sit longer and really is the big reason why we had such a low number of miles.
Right. And, with the low number of miles, that's one thing. There's also the low freight market, the rates that you're actually getting from shippers. Excuse me. And with that one, that's actually something I'm really interested to see in 2023. with the manager that you're talking about bringing on, because if there's a manager who's able to handle, some of the day-to-day working with the drivers kind of things, then that frees up, say, Nate, to move into more of a sales role in a way, right? You're looking for those, you've been talking about this literally since day one, finding those direct relationships with shippers, cutting out the middleman of the brokers. And that's not me bad-mouthing brokers. They are vital and wonderful, and we love brokers. But if we can have more of a direct relationship with the shippers, then that's going to increase the rates, right? And so hopefully by introducing just one more role to the company, you can actually increase that rate per mile, which over 10 trucks is going to have a huge impact over the course of a year, right?
You worded that perfectly. And that's really one of the big reasons that we feel like bringing on a manager will help with that, is because that's exactly our plan, is that will give Nate that much more time to sell. And if we can increase our rate per mile, average across our fleet by 5 or 10 cents, that more than pays
for the manager.
Yeah. At 10 trucks, a 5 to 10 cent increase in our rate per mile is huge.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's as I got very, very tired of hearing at some of the companies I used to work for, it's a numbers game, Chris. It's a numbers game.
It is a numbers game. So that's one of our biggest reasons for doing that. And so when we talk about low rates and the freight market, the amount of control we have in that is fairly limited.
Right.
But we do have some control because we can go, get more direct shipper relationships, negotiate our rates better, and do some other things. So there is a little bit of control that we have there.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things over the course of the next year is going to be a huge focus for us.
Yeah.
We've made some gains in 2022. We plan on making even more gains in 2023.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, before we get too excited about 2023, let's wrap up our October 2022 financials by talking about a couple of other notable items from the profit and loss statement. And once again, for anybody who's new to the show, you can go to haulinassetsllc.com and check out the actual profit and loss statement so you can see the numbers that we're talking about. And hopefully that'll help you as you're trying to do your own P&L statements for your company that you have already started, right? Right, everybody? Or that you're going to one day. Yeah. Let's be aspirational. All right. So, Chris, a few things to pull out from the P&L. First of all, fuel costs were, I hesitate to use the term outrageous, but pretty high.
Yeah, this was outrageous is not outside of the realm of what it was.
Yeah, it 41.3% of revenue in October went to fuel, which could it be worse? Sure.
Yeah, in November it was worse.
Right. Oh boy, really?
Yeah.
Okay, well we'll get there. There's a little preview for next month.
But to have October at that 41.3% is tied, essentially tied for the highest that we've ever seen. And to have the rates as low as they've been and the fuel so high, it's tough.
Now, as a consumer, as I'm filling up with my unleaded, I'm seeing fuel prices come down a little. We're not talking a ton, but a little over the last 2 or 3 months. Has that not been seen in the diesel market?
No, it's actually the opposite has happened. Especially in November, gas prices decreased, diesel prices increased.
Oh, that sucks. Well, good luck, everybody. Jeez. Yeah. And we've talked about this before. There's not a ton you can do about it. With fuel prices, you are kind of at the mercy of the market in a lot of ways. But there are some things you can do to mitigate. You talked a couple months ago about keeping track of the driver's idle time, and making sure that doesn't get out of control. Because it's again. Oh well, actually, Chris, this feeds right back into the whole numbers game idea, where if somebody's idling a little too much and it's causing a 4 or 5% increase in the amount of fuel consumption, that doesn't sound like all that much. But you stretch that out over, what am I, Canadian now? You stretch that out over 8 trucks, 10 trucks, more, and pretty soon that 4 or 5% increase in fuel consumption is a big freaking deal.
It is a big number. Yeah. And we actually, part of this is that problem. with idling. We had a couple of our brand new trucks that we got that they got delivered without bunk heaters in them.
Ooh.
Because the bunk heaters, they were back ordered.
Right.
And so
they had
it's
to
getting
idle.
cold, so they had to idle.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's, again, mitigating factors that you can't always control. Well, let's talk about another number then, which is truck number 9. And there's probably not a lot to tell here that we haven't told with a bunch of the trucks already, which is just to say that anytime you're onboarding a new truck, there are costs associated with that in terms of registration, insurance, the
Loan origination fees.
Yeah, exactly.
Just equipping it. Yeah.
Doing the wraps, the vinyls,
The logos.
and whatnot.
Yep.
So what was it? About 4K for for truck number 9 was a significant expense for this month. And then maintenance and repairs was, again, do we say outrageous?
It was high. I think the highest it's ever been.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Even with some of the stuff that we've talked about before. Okay, so came out to 14K. I didn't realize that was, if not a record, then awfully close.
It's close to it.
What happened was, there was a turbo that went out.
Truck number 1. So the original truck, the turbo went out on it.
Well, a few more years on that bad boy, and it's going to be in a museum, the Haulin
It is.
Assets Museum.
But you know what? We're going to celebrate our December financials with that truck.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to be paid off.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
That's exciting.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, well, again, previews for something to come a little bit later. Excellent. So there was, so the turbo went out in truck number 1. Any other significant repairs that are worth mentioning?
At that point, it's just a lot of tic-tacky stuff.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, yeah, nobody hit a deer.
No.
Okay.
Somebody hit a deer, though.
Who did?
Bubba.
Oh, Bubba hit a deer.
He
Oh,
told me
Bubba.
Bubba hit a deer.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I hope he's all right. I'm sure the deer's not.
I gave him a little longer Thanksgiving than he was expecting.
That's funny. Well, I mean, not for him, but, well, good luck out there, Bubba. Longtime listeners will remember Bubba. If you don't, you go back, I don't know, 30, 40 episodes, something like that. You can go check out our conversation with Bubba. All right. So, and then the last thing that we wanted to pull out and talk about was the IFTA. And was, which state is it?
Well, there's several.
Was it Oregon?
Oregon's the big one. But we had, every quarter you have to pay your IFTA taxes.
Right.
And so that came out in October. The big one was Oregon. We paid $1,200 to Oregon, but there was several hundred to New Mexico, a few hundred to Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think our IFTA tax itself was like $300.
So, but it all adds up.
So total, it was probably pretty close to, almost $2,000 for all of them.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, again, another significant expense. Okay, it's not 14K like repairs and maintenance, but still, that's a significant expense. All right. So again, HaulinAssetsLLC.com is where you can go check out all those numbers. And if you have any questions about those, if any other numbers jump out to you, then I encourage everybody to use the comment section on HaulinAssetsLLC.com, or you can do it on Facebook. And ask the questions that you've got there. We can either address those by replying to you directly in those places, or if it's a question that maybe ties into the numbers the following month, maybe we'll pull that out and talk to you on the next numbers podcast. Anyway, so yeah, if you go there, have some questions, please don't hesitate to let us know. Chris, there is an impact tip that I want to make sure that we go over today, and that is take care of your health, everybody. Right?
Yeah.
This is a big deal. So if you don't end up like Chris, just put the cigarettes down, everybody. No,
I do. I feel like I've gone from 4 packs a day to 2. I think I'm getting a little better.
4 packs a day would be impressive. I think I'm not even mad. I'm just impressed at that point. All right. So I guess as a serious point, it could tie in, if you're sitting in a truck all day and, you're doing however many miles you are a week, a month, that adds up. All that sitting, that adds up. Make sure that you take care of yourself. Make sure you take some time when you're loading, unloading, at night. If you're stopped for a while, get some exercise in. Dude, just eat a little bit better tomorrow than you did today. whatever the case may be. Take care of yourself out there. Your health is important, not only for yourself, but for your company as well, right?
Yep.
So, Chris, anything else you want to leave us with? And by leave us with, I mean whisper at us before we head out?
I think that's good.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Again, motorcarrierhq.com is where you can go actually get a human on the phone to talk to you about those specific questions that you have. So I want to make sure I get that in there one more time. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We will see you all for the November's financial numbers coming up. See you, Chris.
Then.